She was 11 years old when her parents dropped her off at the curb and drove away. "You want to be an adult? Find your own way home," they said, and disappeared. She never called them mom and dad again, changed her name, built a new life, forgotten almost. Where are you watching this video from? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. If you were touched, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Naomi Bennett awoke to the shrill vibration of her phone rattling against the glass nightstand. At first she thought it was a dream, the kind of disorienting noise that worms its way into slumber and drags you up against your will. But when her eyes blinked open, adjusting to the soft gray light of early morning slipping between the blinds, she realized it wasn't a dream. Her phone was lighting up, pulsing repeatedly like it was in distress. She sat up slowly, her body still heavy with sleep, and reached for the phone. The screen was bright with a notification. 29 missed calls, all from an unfamiliar number bearing a 601 area code, Mississippi. Her throat tightened. That area code hadn't appeared on her screen in over a decade. She stared at the number as if it might vanish if she looked long enough. Then she noticed the voicemail icon blinking, and right below it, a single text message that made her stomach drop. "This is Derek. Mama's in the hospital. Stroke. Not sure she'll make it. I thought you'd want to know. I'm sorry." Naomi's breath caught. Her brother's name. Derek. Read like a ghost, speaking through a wall she'd spent half her life building. The weight of it made her chest hurt, like something sharp had been driven into her sternum and left there. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the phone back on the nightstand, as if holding it any longer might infect her with the past. She swung her legs out of bed and stood, her bare feet meeting the warm hardwood floor of her one-bedroom apartment in Atlanta. It was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant traffic several stories below. The walls were painted soft sage. Her own artwork hung in strategic places. Calm pieces, structured lines, muted colors. This was her sanctuary, the home she had carved out of silence and survival. And now, with a single message, it had been breached. She moved into the kitchen, moving mechanically, pouring water into the kettle and placing it on the stovetop. Her body moved, but her mind was spiraling. The word "mama" echoed louder than anything else. She hadn't called that woman mama since she was 11 years old. As the kettle heated, Naomi pressed her palms against the counter and closed her eyes. Images came unbidden. A dirt road, dust rising in the air, the sound of tires crunching gravel, and then silence. She flinched, physically, as the memory overtook her. Her breathing quickened, shallowed, and the air felt too thick to pull into her lungs. Her heart pounded erratically, and she felt a sharp, cold edge of panic slip into her chest. She stumbled backward and sank into one of the kitchen chairs, wrapping her arms around herself, gasping as if she were drowning in open air. She was having a panic attack. It had been years since the last one. She had done the work. Years of therapy, countless hours in support groups, daily meditations, grounding exercises. But trauma was a cunning thing. It waited patiently beneath the surface, and then pounced when you least expected it. Naomi buried her face in her hands, trying to remember what Dr. Carter had taught her. Name 5 things you see, 4 you can touch, 3 you hear. But her mind wouldn't cooperate. All she could see was the red Mississippi clay stretching out beside that road, the sweat on her forehead, the sun beating down, the laughter from the car window before it sped off. The door opened behind her, and she heard a familiar voice. "Naomi?" She turned her head. Elijah stood in the doorway, dressed in gray joggers and a faded Morehouse t-shirt. His locks were pulled back, and his face was still marked with sleep, but his eyes widened as soon as he saw her. "I got a message," she choked out, her voice barely audible, "from Derek. My mother, she's in the hospital." Elijah was beside her in an instant, crouching down and gently taking her hands in his. "Breathe with me," he said softly. "In through your nose, out through your mouth, just like that. I'm here." She tried, matching his breath. After a few moments, the pressure in her chest began to ease, and the room slowly came back into focus. He didn't ask questions right away. He just sat with her, grounding her, being there. When she finally spoke again, her voice was hoarse. "She had a stroke." He said, "She might not make it." Elijah nodded. "I'm sorry, baby." Naomi looked away. Why now, after all this time? Why do they get to just reach in and shake everything up? You don't have to respond, he said gently. You don't owe them anything. She nodded but didn't speak. The truth was, she didn't know what she felt. Anger, yes. Fear, certainly. But also something else. Something more fragile and elusive. She needed help making sense of it. An hour later, she sat across from Dr. Carter, her therapist of 4 years, in the soft beige room she knew better than her own bedroom. Dr. Carter listened carefully as Naomi explained what had happened. She didn't interrupt. She let Naomi's words fill the space between them, let the shaking in her voice speak even when the words stopped coming. When Naomi finally finished, her hands limp in her lap, Dr. Carter tilted her head slightly. It makes sense that you're feeling overwhelmed. You've spent years building a life that is safe, predictable, self-defined. Contact from your family, especially under these circumstances, disrupts that. It reactivates the trauma. I thought I'd moved past it, Naomi said. I thought I'd buried it. Dr. Carter's voice was calm but firm. You didn't bury it. You built around it. You built a life that doesn't require you to touch it every day. That's not the same as being over it. Naomi blinked, absorbing that. So what do I do? She asked. That depends on what you want. Do you want to speak with your brother? Do you want to see your mother? Naomi shook her head slowly. I don't know. Part of me, I don't want anything to do with them. Another part, it's like I'm 11 again, standing on that road, wondering why they left me. Dr. Carter leaned forward slightly. If there's anything unfinished, if there's something you need, not for their sake, but for yours, that's worth exploring. But you don't have to make any decisions today. Naomi nodded, eyes stinging. I don't know what I need, but I know I can't breathe until I figure it out. That night, Naomi lay awake long after Elijah had drifted to sleep. She stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny bumps in the texture, willing her mind to calm. But the past was loud, louder than it had been in years. She saw her mother's face, not the vague, distorted version she'd taught herself to forget, but vivid and sharp. The way her mouth tightened when Naomi asked too many questions, the way her hands moved, always busy, always punishing or cleaning, and her father, silent in the background, complicit in his quietness, his belt slung over the back of a chair like a threat. Naomi sat up and reached for her phone. She opened the message from Dara again. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then, slowly, she typed, Tell me everything. Just you. Just the truth. No mama. She hit send and set the phone face down. Her hands were shaking again. The next morning, she sat with a mug of tea, watching steam rise into the soft light. Her phone buzzed once. Derek had responded. Naomi stared at the message, heart pounding. She wasn't ready. But then again, she had never been given the choice to be ready. Not when they left her, not when the police picked her up on that dusty road, not when she was handed a garbage bag of her belongings and placed into a stranger's car to start a new life. This time, the choice was hers. She opened the message. The message from Derek had arrived just before dawn, brief and direct, as if he had rehearsed it a dozen times and trimmed it down to only what he dared to say. Naomi had read it once, then again, then a third time, trying to extract meaning from each word, searching for tone in the sterile black letters on a white screen. He had agreed to meet her halfway, in Birmingham, at a quiet cafe he claimed was low-key. She'd chosen the time, mid-morning, when the cafe would be mostly empty, the air still smelling of fresh pastry and disinfectant, before the lunch rush and chatter could drown out her ability to breathe. She arrived first. Of course she did. She always arrived early, a relic of her foster years and adopted adulthood. She hated being the one who walked into a space already filled with people. It was safer to be the observer than the observed. She chose a small corner table near a wide window, streaked with spring pollen, and sat with her back to the wall. The cafe was as Derek had described. Humble, not trendy, not vintage, just clean and quiet, with a single barista working the counter and the soft clatter of plates behind the half wall of the kitchen. Naomi ordered a cup of chamomile tea. She didn't trust herself with coffee. At 10:13 a.m. the door opened, and she saw him. Derek looked older than she remembered, but in a way that didn't align with age so much as erosion. His hairline had receded slightly, and his beard was grayer than she expected. He wore a button-down shirt that was wrinkled at the collar and khaki pants that had lost their crispness. He looked around, his gaze moving past her twice before she raised a hand, barely, to catch his attention. When his eyes met hers, he paused, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then he walked over, each step hesitant. "Naomi," he said, as if trying the name out for the first time. "You look different." She gave a single nod. "I am different." Ah. He sat across from her slowly, folding his hands on the table like a student at detention. "I didn't know if you'd come," he admitted. "I almost didn't," she said, "but I needed to hear it, from you." Derek exhaled and nodded, looking down at the table. "I don't know where to start." "Start with the truth," Naomi said. "I don't need stories. I don't want defense. I just want facts." He nodded again and took a moment before speaking. "After that day, after Mama and Daddy left you?" "We didn't talk about it. Not really. Daddy came home first. He said you had thrown a fit and walked off, that you'd find your way back or call when you were ready. Mama didn't say much at all, just went about her cleaning like nothing happened. And when the police called? When we found out you were in the system, they stuck to one story, that they had been trying to teach you responsibility, that it had gone wrong, but not in any criminal way, that the state had overreacted." Naomi stared at him, unreadable. "And you believed that?" "I didn't know what to believe," he said, shame tinting his voice. "I was 15. They told me you'd been disrespectful, that you were ungrateful, that they had to break you down to build you up. It sounded cruel, but they said it with such certainty." "They always did," Naomi said, more to herself than to him. Derek looked down again. "It wasn't until I got older, college mostly, that I started seeing it clearly, the way Mama justified everything with scripture, the way Daddy always said you were the trouble one when all you ever did was ask questions. Then I met Nancy, my wife, and when we had Emma, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine leaving her anywhere, not for a second. And it hit me, what they did to you." Naomi's hands were folded tightly in her lap. Her shoulders were rigid, but her face remained still. "Ellie told everyone you were in Chicago for school," Derek continued. "Said you'd gone to live with some family friends. Then later that you cut ties, that you turned away from God. They made it all sound like it was your fault." "Bambi always made it my fault," she said. "I didn't stop them," Derek admitted. "I didn't speak up." "No," Naomi said, her voice low. "You didn't." A silence settled between them, dense and uncomfortable. The barista called out an order in the background. A couple walked in, laughing softly as they took a seat near the window. Naomi stared at her tea, untouched, the steam long since faded. "I want to believe you're being honest now," she said finally. "But you let them erase me." "I know," he said, "and I'll regret that the rest of my life. But I want to make it right, however I can." "You can't make it right," Naomi said. "There's no right. There's only now." He nodded, swallowing hard. "She's dying," he said. "Mama. They're saying it's a matter of days, maybe less. She's not conscious all the time, but when she is, she calls your name." Naomi looked at him, skeptical. "She calls for me now, after everything? I don't know if it's guilt or confusion or something else, but she says your name like she's praying." Naomi felt something cold and bitter rise in her throat. "She prayed me out of her house. Now she wants to pray me back in?" "I don't think it's that calculated," he said. "I think she's unraveling." Naomi didn't answer. She could feel the edges of her control fraying. "I'm not asking you to forgive her," Derek said quickly. "I'm not even asking you to talk to her, but I thought you deserved the choice." She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "You asked for facts," he said. "There's one more thing." Naomi lifted her eyes, waiting. "You weren't the only one she did that to." A silence dropped, like glass shattering. "What do you mean?" Naomi asked carefully. "When you were gone, there was this girl from the church, Keisha. She got close to Mama, used to help her with baking. When Keisha started talking about college, about leaving town, Mama flipped, said she was being seduced by secular ways. One day she made Keisha stand in the church vestibule and read Proverbs aloud for hours, said it would cleanse her. Naomi closed her eyes. The weight of it settled over her like fog. She never left town after that, Derek said. I don't know what else happened, but I know Mama thought she was doing the Lord's work. Naomi opened her eyes slowly. No, she was just doing damage. They sat in silence again, the sounds of the cafe muffled around them. Finally, Naomi stood. Derek stood too, uncertain. I'll think about it, she said. Seeing her. No promises. He nodded. That's fair. She hesitated, then asked, What's she like now? Derek shrugged helplessly. Fragile. Small. Not the woman you remember. Naomi gave a short, humorless laugh. She was never small. She was a storm in heels and pearls. She's not anymore. Naomi nodded once. Tell me where the hospital is. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card with the hospital's name and address scribbled on the back. I can meet you there, he offered. No, she said. If I go, I'll go alone. He looked down, then back up. Okay. Naomi? She met his gaze. Thank you for coming. She said nothing as she turned and walked away. Outside, the air was thick with spring humidity. She stood on the sidewalk, her hands clenched into fists. She looked down the street, not toward the hospital, not toward home, but toward the unknown future that always seemed to hinge on choices she never asked to make. Her phone buzzed in her bag. Another message, this one from Elijah. Thinking about you, take your time. I'm here. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood still for a long moment, letting the ache settle in her bones. Then, slowly, she turned her feet in the direction of her car. The road to Willow Creek would not be long in miles, but it would be the longest journey of her life. The air was heavy with spring rain as Naomi guided her car down the winding backroads of northern Mississippi, each mile drawing her deeper into the town she had sworn never to see again. The tires hummed over cracked pavement, lined with overgrown weeds and blooming wisteria vines, their purple blossoms sagging under the weight of the morning drizzle. She had taken the long way, bypassing the interstate and weaving through the forgotten rural paths that her father once favored on Sunday drives, back when he still called her baby girl in public and a disgrace behind closed doors. The GPS instructed her to take a left toward Willow Creek, and she ignored it, following instinct instead. She remembered these roads, not by name but by feeling. How the trees bent inward to shade the lanes, how the telephone wires sagged like tired arms. The closer she got, the more memories returned, slow and bitter like bile rising in the throat. She passed Miller's Grocery, which hadn't changed at all. Same rusted sign, same tilted gas pump out front, still advertising prices that hadn't matched the rest of the country in decades. The windows were smudged with condensation, and inside, she could just barely make out an old man sweeping the floor with a bent broom. It looked exactly as it had the day she was left behind. She hadn't told Elijah she was coming. He'd asked, gently and without pressure, if she wanted him to come with her. She had shaken her head, her eyes dry but unreadable. This is mine, she had said simply. He didn't argue. The town sign was smaller than she remembered. White paint peeling from the wooden frame, the letters faded, Welcome to Willow Creek, Est 1889, home of faith, family, and fields. It mocked her, that word, family. As if it had ever meant safety. As if it had ever meant her. She slowed as she approached the hospital, a 2-story brick building with faded blue letters over the entrance that read Willow Creek Regional Medical Center. A tired-looking nurse stepped outside for a smoke, glancing up briefly at Naomi's car before returning to her cigarette. Naomi parked in the farthest spot from the entrance and sat with the engine running. She stared at the rain sliding down the windshield in slow, meandering paths, each drop like a decision she couldn't take back. The words Derek had said in the cafe still echoed in her chest. She's not the woman you remember. Naomi wasn't sure what that meant. Lorette Bennett had never been one thing. She had been a force, a cold front that arrived without warning and left destruction in its wake. Small was not a word Naomi would have ever used to describe her mother. But fragility? Perhaps that was something time could do, something sickness might enforce, even on the cruelest of people. She turned off the engine, grabbed her umbrella, and stepped out into the rain. The sidewalk was slick, and her boots splashed through shallow puddles as she made her way toward the entrance. Inside, the lobby was dim and quiet, the smell of antiseptic mingling with overripe flowers. A receptionist, with tired eyes and a honey-colored wig, looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to visit Lorette Bennett," Naomi said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The woman consulted a chart. "Room 204, upstairs and to the right. Visiting hours end at 6. Naomi nodded and stepped toward the elevator. She didn't press the button right away. Her fingers hovered, and for a moment she felt her legs weaken. Her body remembered this place. Not this hospital specifically, but this feeling, the tension, the scent of bleach, the low hum of machines. It was the same one she'd felt in the waiting room of the group home when they told her she'd be moved again. The same quiet dread of having no control. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. Room 204 was near the end of the hallway, a corner room, with a view of a muddy courtyard where azaleas bloomed despite the rain. The door was cracked open. Naomi paused, drawing in a breath before pushing it gently wider. Her mother was smaller than she remembered. That was the first thought that pierced the fog. She looked nothing like the towering woman who had dictated scripture and punishment with equal fervor. Lorette was curled in the hospital bed, her body hollowed by illness. Her hair, once rigidly dyed a uniform chestnut, was now steel gray and thin against the pillow. Her face, always so severe and sharply drawn, seemed to have collapsed inward, as if even her bones had given up on resistance. She was asleep, or unconscious, it was hard to tell. Naomi stepped into the room and stood at the foot of the bed. The machines beeped steadily, unbothered by the reappearance of a daughter long erased from the family narrative. A vase of wilting carnations sat on the windowsill. Someone had taped a crayon drawing of a rainbow to the wall, probably from one of the church ladies. Naomi didn't move for several minutes. She simply stood there, breathing, staring, remembering. Then she moved to the chair beside the bed and sat. The cushion hissed slightly beneath her weight. She waited, unsure of what would come next. Part of her had feared that seeing her mother again would unravel her, that she would crumble, regress, beg for explanations she knew would never come. But instead, she felt a strange clarity, like standing in the eye of a storm long past its power. She leaned forward, her voice low and measured. "I'm not here for you," she said. "I'm here for her." Her mother didn't stir. "I'm here for the girl you abandoned, the one you told to walk home down a highway, the one you said was too mouthy, too stubborn, too godless." Still nothing. Naomi didn't expect an answer. "You always said discipline was love, but what you did was break me, over and over. You broke me so well I had to teach myself how to live, how to breathe, how to believe I mattered." Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to keep speaking. "You don't get forgiveness. That's not why I came. I came because I wanted to see if you were real, if you were still flesh and blood, or just a shadow that lived in my mind." The rain outside intensified, tapping against the window in a rhythmic thrum. "You used to say the world was evil, that only inside our home were we safe. But I was never safe there. Not from your hands, not from your silence, not from your prayers. You prayed the fear into me." Naomi sat back, her chest heaving slightly. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it, not just the rage, but the grief underneath. The grief of a child who had once loved her mother, desperately, blindly, and had been punished for it. She opened her eyes again and stood. Her mother remained still, her mouth slightly open, her chest rising and falling with the help of the machine beside her. Naomi turned toward the window, wiping the condensation away with her sleeve to look down at the courtyard. A faint memory flickered. Her fingers in dough, a soft voice humming a hymn, a moment of warmth that had been snuffed out before it could bloom. She remembered Miss Ellen. The thought came like a whisper from a locked room. Miss Ellen, their next-door neighbor, had been the one safe place Naomi had known in her childhood. A widow with kind eyes and a warm kitchen, she had let Naomi sit on a stool and help with biscuits, had lent her books from a secret shelf behind her pantry. had once said, "You don't have to be afraid of who you are, baby girl." Naomi had clung to that sentence like a lifeline. It was the first time anyone had said she was allowed to be herself. She closed her eyes and saw Miss Ellen's face, her smile, the way she wiped her hands on her apron before pulling Naomi into a hug. That had been the first crack in the fortress her mother built. Naomi turned back toward the bed. "I made a life without you, a good one. I have a man who loves me and doesn't try to fix me. I have friends who know what I've been through and still choose me. I work for myself and I help others tell their stories. I am happy. And none of that is because of you." Her voice didn't shake anymore. "I'm not here to say goodbye. I'm here to close the door." Naomi picked up her umbrella and walked toward the door. She paused once, looking back. "You could have loved me. That was always an option." Then she stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding but not breaking. She didn't see Derek. She didn't stop at the nurse's station. She walked straight to the exit, the sound of her boots echoing down the corridor like punctuation marks on a sentence long overdue. Outside, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. She raised her umbrella and walked toward her car, each step pulling her further from the past, each breath anchoring her in the present. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because she had already cried enough for 100 lifetimes. That girl on the side of the road had found her way home after all. Not to the one they'd tried to make her believe she needed, but to the one she'd built herself. The drive out of Willow Creek felt different than the drive in. The rain had eased to a misting fog that clung to the road like memory, soft and persistent. Naomi's hands gripped the wheel with a steadiness that surprised her, her knuckles no longer pale with tension, her shoulders less coiled. She didn't turn the radio on. The silence wasn't empty, it was full. The kind of silence that hummed with meaning. Every mile she put between herself and that hospital room felt like breath returning to her lungs. She had not said goodbye to Derek before leaving. He had offered to wait outside, to meet her after the visit, but Naomi had declined. She knew herself well enough to recognize that she couldn't split her attention between confrontation and comfort. She needed the experience of seeing her mother again to belong entirely to her, and now that it was over, she had no desire to pick at it with words. She needed space, needed time to let the weight of it settle in her chest and decide whether it would stay there or drift away like fog on the windshield. Halfway back to Atlanta, she pulled over at a rest stop near the Georgia state line. A wide wooden picnic shelter sat beside a grove of pine trees, their needles damp and shining. Naomi stepped out of the car, the scent of wet bark and earth surrounding her like a familiar perfume. She walked a few paces away from the lot, tucked herself beneath the shelter, and leaned against the rough timber post. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw Elijah's name. There was a voicemail. Her chest tightened. She pressed play. "Hey baby, just checking in. I know you probably need time and space, but I wanted you to know I'm here. I made dinner, something simple, nothing fancy. I'll be home all evening. If you want to talk, I'll listen. If you don't, I'll sit next to you in silence. You've got all the room you need. Love you." She closed her eyes, the words wrapping around her like a warm coat. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "I'm coming home," and slid the phone back into her pocket. By the time she pulled into the driveway of their townhouse, the sun had begun to set. The sky was painted in soft streaks of gold and rose, the first stars blinking into existence above the rooflines of her neighborhood. The porch light was on. Inside, she could see Scout's silhouette behind the frosted window beside the door. As soon as the car door shut, he began to bark, that familiar throaty yelp full of joy and protectiveness. Elijah opened the door before she reached it, Scout bounding past him and rushing toward her, tail wagging furiously. Naomi crouched and ran her hands over the dog's coarse fur, letting his warmth ground her. She didn't realize she was crying until Elijah stepped onto the porch and cupped her face gently in his hands. "Hey," he said softly. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "I went. I saw her." He nodded, thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "And?" "I told her everything," Naomi said. "Everything I needed to say." She didn't speak. Maybe she couldn't, but it didn't matter. I didn't need her answers. I just needed the truth to stop living only inside me. Elijah pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since the message from Derek arrived, Naomi let herself truly collapse, not in pain, but in release. She wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't a frightened girl waiting for permission to matter. She was a woman who had faced the people who broke her and walked away whole. That night she sat on the couch with Elijah and told him everything. No edits, no softening. She spoke of the road, of the hospital room, of her mother's stillness, and the memories that had returned like ghosts crowding the corners of her mind. Elijah didn't interrupt. He listened the way she always hoped someone would listen, as if her pain deserved the same space as her strength. When she finished, he didn't offer solutions. He just took her hand and held it. The next morning, Naomi scheduled a session with Dr. Carter. They met in the same beige office, but something about the space felt different, as if it had expanded to fit the new shape of Naomi's experience. She recounted the visit, her voice steadier than she expected. "You didn't go looking for closure," Dr. Carter said when Naomi paused, "but you found something close to it." "I thought closure would feel like forgiveness," Naomi said, "but it doesn't. I don't forgive them. I don't know if I ever will." "That's okay," Dr. Carter replied. "Forgiveness isn't a requirement for healing. Sometimes drawing a line is the most loving thing you can do for yourself." Naomi nodded, feeling that truth settle into place. It wasn't a balm, it wasn't a cure, but it was a foundation, one she had built plank by plank with every choice to keep going, to love herself, to tell the truth. Later that week, Naomi sat at her desk in the sunlit corner of her home studio, surrounded by sketchbooks and color swatches. A blank canvas sat before her. Not literal, she hadn't painted in years, but metaphorical. For the first time in a long while, she felt the impulse to create something personal. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to draw. The lines were slow and deliberate. First, a girl standing at the edge of a road, her small back to the viewer, the horizon stretching out before her like a question. Then, another image. A teenager in a dimly lit bedroom, sketching by flashlight, fear crouching in the corner but not yet winning. Then a woman, shoulders squared, walking out of a hospital with her head held high. She worked for hours, losing track of time, letting the images guide her. When she finally stepped back, the series of illustrations lay across the table like pages from a forgotten chapter. She titled them in pencil. "Left Behind," and "Not Broken," "Talking Home," and finally, the last, "Built from the Ashes." The drawings weren't perfect, but they were hers, a record of everything she had survived and reclaimed. She took photos and saved them, unsure of whether she would ever share them, but certain that they needed to exist. That evening she wrote a letter, not to send, not to publish, but to exhale. She wrote it in longhand, her pen gliding across the paper with a steadiness that belied the storm behind it. "Dear Mama, you taught me how to survive by showing me what not to be. You taught me the weight of silence, the sting of scripture used as a blade, the way a child can disappear from her own life without anyone noticing. You will never know who I became because you never truly wanted to see me. But I want you to know this. I did not become a reflection of you. I became a revolution against you. I am loved. I am safe. I am whole. I am free. Goodbye." She folded the letter and tucked it into the bottom drawer of her desk. She would never mail it, but she didn't need to. It had already served its purpose. That weekend, she and Elijah drove to the park just before sunset. Scout trotted ahead, chasing shadows and sniffing clumps of grass as if the world were brand new. Naomi walked slowly, her hand tucked in Elijah's, the sky turning lavender above them. "You thinking about her?" he asked gently. "Not really," she said. "I'm thinking about me, who I am now." He smiled. "And who's that?" She paused, watching the breeze dance through the trees. "Someone who came back for herself," she said. "Not for them, not for closure, but because the girl on that road deserved to be found, and I found her." They walked in silence for a while, the kind that spoke louder than words. When they returned home, Naomi opened her computer and started a new folder. She titled it Legacy and uploaded the drawings, not for a gallery, not for acclaim, for herself, and maybe one day, for a daughter who would never have to question whether she was wanted. As the screen glowed softly in the dark, Naomi leaned back in her chair and exhaled. She had crossed the bridge and burned it behind her, not in rage, but in resolution. There would be no looking back. because everything she needed was already here. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. There's more stories like this waiting for you. Go check them out. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, go ahead and share it. Thanks for watching.